Hello and welcome, and thank you for joining us today. I am excited about my guest today, and we are using this podcast episode as a dual purpose. So you might be seeing us on the Child Care Business Coach podcast or on the True Value of Your Voice podcast. I'm excited to have one of my colleagues with me here today, Summer PIca. Why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Fantastic. Thank you for having me, Evelyn. I'm thrilled to be here. My name is Summer PIca, and I am the founder of the Conscious Classroom Certification Model, wife and mama to 3 kids. I think it's always so important to include that aspect of our lives because sometimes the early childhood education field feels a little all-consuming, and we think we are our job. So not only am I in the early childhood education, but I also am a wife and a mom to 3 amazing kids.
I love that so much because you're right. One of the things I love to teach on is we are not our labels, right? We are not our profession. We are not. So I love that you brought in that piece too, because you're right. Our profession doesn't define us. And we're so much more than just the labels that are put on us. So I love that you brought that in. And you're the first one that I've interviewed for the True Value of Your Voice podcast that mentioned the personal aspect. So let's talk about your voice. And I know you have a wonderful, powerful voice for early childhood education. And we were talking before we started to hit record, how you and I both have some other ventures. And in these other ventures, both times people tried to talk us out of our position with early childhood education. They tried to talk us out of being almost in that mentorship position for child care center owners. And we've both been questioned on, do you really want it to be this industry? But I know that you stayed in this industry anyway, and that you really stood in your own power here and stuck with it. So let's talk about your voice and why you chose this field.
Well, it's really interesting because I feel like early childhood education captures your heart. Mm-hmm. It clings to it. It captures your heart and it does not let you go. I was the owner of 3 large Montessori schools in the Twin Cities area, Minneapolis, St. Paul. And I sold my schools February 28th, 2020.
Oh,
COVID.
wow.
Yeah, it was like COVID hit the United States March 12th. So here I was. I thought I was going to put my feet up, take a nap, hang out with my mom. And that was actually the reason we sold, was my mom was diagnosed with terminal cancer. And I was like, for the last 18 years, I've taken care of everyone else's family. It's my turn to take care of mine, right? So here I was, like, we have all this health stuff going on and sold my business. I genuinely thought I was going to take a nap. Just kidding. 2 weeks later, COVID hits and my phone is ringing off the hook because at that time, when you have 3 schools, I had 92 employees. I had 450 children. I had 700 parents that every single day I was serving. And so even though I didn't own the school anymore, I still was that trusted person. And I was spending so much time on the phone that I thought, all right, here we go. I'm going to start a consulting company. So all through COVID, I just, much like everybody else, we kind of just pivoted. We just did whatever we had to do. And I was hosting virtual classes for preschools, whether it was like staff training or parenting classes. I'm also a certified parent coach. And so I was doing some parenting classes. I had ventured outside of the ECE world. I was doing classes for staff, Target Corporate, Medtronic, Square, big companies.
Yeah.
But what I discovered was my favorite part of the week was when I was sitting with the staff ECE. That was my favorite part of the week. That's just when I lit up.
Yeah. That is awesome. So that's what your calling is. And you were able to just stick with that and advocate. And really what you're doing is advocating for young children, right? Especially with your classroom certification, and just really, it is a form of advocacy. And when you go and speak in all of even if you're not doing it in a formal way, you really are. You really are advocating for what's best for the children, and speaking to parents is the same thing. So ironically, I was telling you before we hit record how last week I was meeting with a lot of key stakeholders around the country. And one of the biggest things they told us is that for us to really make that dent in ECE, it's the parents we need to be speaking to now. So it's interesting that that's kind of where you got your start with just this early childhood emphasis.
Yes. Well, and when I was coming up with the Conscious Classroom Certification Framework, I think part of it is the communication aspect and making sure all stakeholders have the same communication. Otherwise, we're fighting against each other. Yeah. And so I include parents in my framework. I include whether, the board, the admin, the teachers, the parents. Yeah. They're all included in my framework when we talk about communicating and getting on the same page with all the information.
And that's beautiful. And we always talk about the whole child, but that seems like the piece that so often is forgotten. And a lot of times whether you're in the K through 12 world or even in the preschool world, we forget the parents sometimes. And we also forget that our opinions and what we want is really secondary to them. And we position ourselves in our own minds. We sometimes put ourselves and our opinions above the parents. But that really is such a flawed way of thinking. And so I love the fact that what you are doing is creating more of that collaboration, because that is so vital.
One of my, we had founding principles at my preschool. And our 3 founding principles were leadership, citizenship, partnership. And it's that partnership piece. And even training your staff, training your team that we're partners in this.
Yes.
We support. Yes, we are the experts and we do know better, but we are partners with the parents. It's not a us against them situation. Nobody is waking up in the morning, putting their feet on the floor and saying, "Oh, I'm going to go make Miss Summer's life miserable today."
Yes.
No, we're partners. And so it's a shift in mindset. Yes. And I really, really firmly believe that is what set our program apart from other programs, is that partnership aspect.
Well, I 100% agree. And I think a lot of times too, we see ourselves as the textbook expert, but we forget that the parents are experts on their own children. And one of the things I tell my staff in my center is it doesn't matter if we disagree with a parent's opinion, because bottom line, each of us are only with these children for a phase of their life, and the parents ultimately get to say. And we may 100% disagree. We may know that according to the textbooks, and sometimes we just know, like God help, we know that we're just like, oh, you poor child, we get it. But bottom line is we still have to respect their opinion. And I love, though, that you even bring that up, because I think you're 100% right. I bet that is a huge reason for your success, because most centers never even think about that. And there's almost this haughty attitude of we are better than them. And we see it in each, like the K through 12 system with the ECE system. We see it with parents and the people in our position. So that is a beautiful framework. And I think that alone is something that the world needs to hear, that we need to be collaborative, because again, we are looking at the whole child. And that doesn't just mean education, social, emotional, health, and nutrition. That means their home life, their education life. It is their entire world.
Yes, absolutely. I remember there was one time when you go back to that haughty attitude, right? We had a baby, and I always would remind my staff, hey, like, let's put this into perspective. 6 weeks ago, 8 weeks ago, 12 weeks ago, this baby lived in its mama's belly. Like, mind blown. And so what we're dealing with is these parents who are new to this parenting gig. They're brand new. And I remember there was a baby. The baby really did need to transition to solids. And the mom was pushing back and saying, no, I talked to the doctor. They're going to wait till 12 months. The baby was uncomfortable and was really, really hungry. So I remember one day I infant teachers were complaining, and they were talking to us about this, and it was a stressor for everybody. It was a stressor for the other children. It was a stressor for the staff. The parents were stressed getting the same message every day. So I positioned myself in the infant room at PIca, and I was sitting on the floor playing. So the mom came in and sat down, and we were kind of just chatting and playing. And I said, I know that it was moving my own personal children, moving my kids from bottle to solids. That was a really scary time.
Right.
I have a cookbook that I used. And it's gooey and it's gummy and it's full of, drips and spills. And I've circled some of my favorite recipes. Would that be helpful for you? Would you like to borrow that? The next week she came in and she was like, I made all this baby food and I put it in the ice cube trays like you said. And so it was just helping that parent get over that transition. Now, I could have approached it differently. I could have approached it where we sit and gossip with the infant teachers. But instead it was like, hey, what can I use from my personal experience to say, wow, that is a really hard transition.
Right.
Let's get through it together.
So you showed empathy. Yes, you shared your knowledge through empathy, and that really probably helped that parent not to feel less than, not to feel like they weren't enough, which they're already struggling. We all remember what it was like to be a new parent, and you're already feeling like you're not good enough. How am I going to get this together? How do I get this figured out? And they're just trying their best. And that's something I like to remind myself and my staff all the time is everyone is really just trying their best with the knowledge they have.
Yes.
That's it. And when you understand that they really are, it really changes the perspective to help them to remember that. And another question I always like to remember to ask is just ask yourself, what happened to them? Why is this such a big deal? Why do they have these fears? When you come from that place of curiosity, the judgment goes away.
Yes, I love that. That whole mindset shift of approach with curiosity instead of judgment.
Yes.
And it's easy to practice. I was going to say it's one of those things. I know when I get stressed, in my head, I don't rarely say it out loud, but in my head, I come with those little zingers, right? So what I've trained myself to do time and time again is like, if I see someone running, like, hey, good for you for getting out there and doing what you want to do. Mm-hmm. And so that's how you practice shifting that judgment, right? Yeah. Where it's like, hey, good for you for doing what you want to do. Do I want to run? No, I don't want to run. I'm not going to run. But good for you if that's what you want to do. Hey, look at you being healthy. And shifting from judgment to curiosity.
Right. I love that so much. And I love that you're really training and that you stepped up during that time. And it's a wonderful thing to do. So tell me about some of the speaking that you do and some of the trainings. I know you do a lot all over. What are you most passionate when you get to be a keynote speaker or get to speak on the stage? What are you most passionate in, like a 45-minute to an hour talk?
My favorite thing to do is to tell the how, because I think a lot of times we all know what we're supposed to be doing.
Yeah.
Right? So like the buzzwords in the industry, if we talk about values, or if we talk about, some of these soft skills too, like time management or delegation or conflict resolution. Okay, we know we're supposed to. Anyone who's in a leadership role, we know we're supposed to manage our time. Yeah. We know this. But how?
Yes.
And so that's the piece where whenever I'm given the opportunity to speak, to train, to interact with people, I always want to leave them with the how, the action steps into, like, is it going to fix everything overnight? No, absolutely not. But I follow the Kaizen philosophy, which is a Japanese business philosophy. Small steps over a long period of time will create change. And so when I get to speak, it's always about the how, and it's always about making these manageable chunks so people can actually make transformation in their lives.
That is wonderful, because you're absolutely right. And I think a lot of times leaders in general and just people, it's part of the human condition where we start looking at ourselves and we get trapped in comparison, right? And then we look at, well, why do they have it together and I don't? Why do they manage their time? And my coach always says comparison is the thief of joy. But instead, what you're doing is you're bringing them those solutions instead of looking at you as a leader saying, how does she do all this? You're saying, well, here's how I do it, which is so empowering and so impactful. And not only can it change early childhood education, but it really can change a lot of industries across the board and really help with that, alleviating so much of the guilt that people put on themselves because they feel like they're not enough.
Yes, especially in these industries where you genuinely feel like you're drinking from the end of a fire hose.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
But it changes from not even day to day, but like 5 minute to 5 minute.
Yeah.
And everything feels like an emergency all the time.
Yep.
And so it's kind of one of those things where it's like, okay, I know I'm supposed to be doing this, but how when all this stuff is coming at me all the time?
Right.
So a big thing that I work on too is being proactive, not reactive.
Mm-hmm.
So how do we take a step back and become proactive instead of being reactive?
Right. Yes. Well, that's awesome. It's a lot of you and I sound so
I know.
so aligned, right?
Not only are we purple shirt fans, we match. We also philosophically align too. I love it.
Oh yes. And by the way, we did not choose this. If you're watching and not listening, if you're listening to the podcast, we are wearing the same color shirt that's also turtlenecks. It's kind of funny, and that was not planned. So we are so
happy coincidence.
That is awesome. But and it just goes to show philosophically, like I have a membership, and the first thing I teach is time management, because I know that my members aren't going to have the time to do the work if I don't start with time management. And then we go into vision philosophy because they have to know what their passion is. But we also, same thing, we teach what I call my fire time. And that is how you put out fires instead of we do fire prevention instead of dealing with fires all the time. So I love it. And it's so important for our industry, because directors, especially, and owners, but especially owner directors, the pressure is so high, and it doesn't always have to be. And a lot of times these things that you're talking about, if you just get those in order, but again, like you said, we just don't always know how. So having someone like you to come alongside and help guide and teach these hows is just, it can literally change a person's entire life.
Yes. I've heard it time and time again where they're like, okay, my boss signed me up for this, and I thought it was going to be all work, but I'm using this with my husband. I'm using this with my kid. I'm using this with, managing sports schedules and all of this kind of stuff. And so it really is, once a person knows how, they just run.
Yeah.
I mean, people who are in leadership roles, they get there for a reason. They get there because they're amazing, especially in early childhood education. It's full of amazing, amazing people. So once you tell them the how, they just run. There's no stopping them.
Yep. I love it. That is awesome. And you're right. They do. And it's, I love just being able to give them their life back to a certain extent. I joke all the time that when my husband was alive, he used to tell me that he was the other man and that my child care center was my spouse. And there was a point where I realized I got to get this in order because this isn't healthy. And it's a beautiful thing when we can take that and just flip it and make it so that our spouses can be our spouse and our businesses can be our business.
Absolutely.
Well, Summer, thank you so much for joining us today. And I just wanted to just say I was thrilled to have you in the True Value of Your Voice. I know we do the most important work in the world, and we need more people advocating and working with early childhood professionals so that we can change our entire industry. I told you I just got done interviewing Prina Richards. So people like you and Prina, I love that we can collaborate and we can work together to just make this industry better. And so what are some final thoughts you have?
Well, first of all, I just want to say thank you so much for creating the True Value of Your Voice. It was so impactful and amazing. I think a lot of times when we're in this role of education consultant,
Yes.
We're kind of just winging it. And so to
Yeah.
come together collectively as a group and take away some of your amazing wisdom and your skills, it was so valuable. But then also to network with other people.
Yes.
It was so impactful. And so thank you so much for creating the true value of your voice. It was awesome. It was awesome. And if you're on the fence, if you're questioning it, do it. That's it. That's it.
You. I might have to play that for some of my some of my sale pitches. I'll have to play that. But yeah, and what I love the most though is it's the sense of collaboration, where a lot of times people may think, well, you guys should be competition. No, we're both on the same mission and we both want the same thing for our industry. So why does it have to be this place of competition when we can collaborate to make things better?
Absolutely. Well, and you had mentioned Prina, sense value of your voice. Prina and I have been texting back and forth. We've been
awesome.
Collaborating. We've gotten together a couple of times and did working sessions where we're like, all right, what are you working on? Okay, this is what I'm working on. Let's pound it out. And so it just has really opened up doors. And like you said, it's not about competition. It really is about building your network of amazing people who are really supportive.
Yes. And honestly, the more we collaborate and the more we come from a place of abundance, the more successful all of us will be, because our industry will be more successful.
Absolutely.
So thank you so much for joining us.